Pulsar-23 is officially my favorite drum machine. I had never been as excited for a drum machine as I was when they first announced this, and it's fully lived up to the hype that I had for it. Full disclosure, I have a relationship with Soma since. They gave me a partial discount on this unit in exchange for me putting up this video on my channel, but they don't have any say over what I'm going to do in this video. They're not even going to see it before I post it. That's the sponsored situation. So first off, it's a semi-modular drum machine that you patch with alligator clips. And that was a decision that let them fit a lot more patch points on the board, and it also lets you make multiple connections to one patch point very easily because you can just keep on clipping on alligator clips. Well, I guess maybe you can fit 4. Yes, my estimating skills are flawless. There are 4 channels and each one has a unique sound generator. So there's a bass drum that you can tune, and there's also a pitch envelope at the beginning that you can dial in. There's a drive control. And then each track has volume, an effects send, and attack and release. The next channel is a bass module that of course you can tune as well, and then it's got a shape control which adds harmonics, as well as a warp control which is like a wave shaper. You can get really nice and aggressive, and then there's a low pass filter with adjustable resonance. Now, one weird thing is you can set the bass channel so that its pitch is controlled by CV, or if you flip this switch to the middle, it's controlled by MIDI, or if you flip this switch to the right, it's now a percussion sound generator. You get these really interesting kind of metallic, clangy sounds, kind of cowbellish sometimes, but as you heard, there's also sort of some snare range in there as well. The third channel is sort of a clap snare that goes through a bandpass filter. You can mix between 2 different noise oscillators. And the second one is tunable. And then this clap knob kind of creates a clap feel by spreading some transients out. And then the last channel is a hi-hat. Tunable. The warp control kind of adds more noise. And this one goes through a high-pass filter. So how do you make this thing do beats? Well, there's a couple different options. I've been using these add buttons so far that are both used for performing and for recording, but each channel also has a trig input. So sending triggers there will trigger that channel, and there's a clock section up here, so that's pretty handy. We can trigger some sounds with the clock. Actually, let me explain the clock first. So right over here is the master clock. It's in and out. You can connect external clock to here to control the tempo, or you can use the internal tempo, and this will give you the master clock pulse. And the other pins here are clock divisions and multiplications, so you have a variety of different frequency triggers. Let's take 16 and go to our hi-hat channel. So that's how triggering works, and it's super handy. You can even send outside signals to trigger things if you want. You don't have to use just these clock divisions and multiplications, but I think it's a lot more fun to play it manually. So let's record some loops. First, I'm gonna connect the lowest clock division to this looper reset input. That just keeps all the 4 tracks in sync together and also in sync with the clock. Although if you want to get really wacky and have things drift around, you can totally do that. Each track actually has its own independent clock input, so you can have them running at different speeds and just get wild with it. But for now, I'm going to keep them all synced, and I'll record a basic loop. So all the channels that I want to record, I'm going to flip from play to record. I actually think I'm gonna get that 16th note thing going on the hi-hat again to keep time while I record this loop. But now anything that I play on these pads will just start looping. And you've got a 4-bar loop in total. If you look at the metronome light here, you can see how long it goes for. There's gonna be a bright light there. 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4, downbeat. That's the length of the loop. But also this is just an amount of pulses and you can use them however you like. So for instance, if I wanted to create a 2-bar loop instead, maybe I would connect the hi-hat to the 8 multiplier instead of the 16. Oh, here's a thing I can show you. Those are gates coming out of the clock, which is why that hi-hat sound is being held. So if I connect instead to one of these gate to impulse points, we can instead get little triggers. Cool. So now when that bright light comes around again, I'm gonna start recording my 2-bar loop. My playing was a little bit sloppy and you can definitely keep that stuff if you want. The resolution on the recording is really, really high. So, you know, you can preserve all of your human feel if you want, but I actually would prefer to quantize this. So what I'm gonna do is hold down all 3 of these transport controls, which is how you activate the quantizer, and then just touch the tracks that you wanna quantize. And you can't play while you're quantizing, so that's a thing, but it's fine. So let's connect the hi-hat back again and we will play. See, it had to reset the loop there. Now it's quantizing to 16th notes, but because I decided to make this a 2-bar thing, it's quantizing to 30 seconds, and you can hear there's one kick that, well, it's not where I would want it to be. It's kind of a bit of a super syncopated one. So I'm gonna show you how I would go in and replace that if I wanted to. But first, let's talk about this multi-function little set of buttons here. As you can see, there's one labeled bank, one labeled L, one labeled M, and you can press them in all different kinds of combos. So there's a little bit to memorize, but I'm actually finding I'm pretty fluid with it after just a couple of days. So pressing bank and L stops the playback. Pressing bank and M will play, but you also have to choose a part of the loop, and you do that using the add and delete buttons. So basically the loop is divided into 8 equal part sections and you can trigger any one of them. The bottom 2 buttons are for velocity, so you got low, medium, and if you hold both of them together, it's high. If you're not holding them by default, it's high. Bank lets you choose between 4 banks of loops, so you just hit bank and then add or delete, and then each channel's add or delete buttons selects one of 4 loops. And then like I just showed you, pressing all 3 of the buttons together and one of the add or delete buttons will quantize that track. So let's talk about these add and delete buttons now. You can kind of think of each track as just being on or off. An add, for as long as you hold an add, will have the track on, and delete will have it off or be erasing. So depending on whether you're in record or play mode, delete deletes or mutes. So let's go edit that kick I was talking about. Kind of just improvised a whole other little kick section in there, but that's fine. So as you can see, while the looper is playing, if you hold delete, it just starts clearing whatever's on there. But while you're holding delete, you can keep adding new notes. So it's a really fun hands-on way to play with and edit your patterns. But you can also do it non-destructively, and you do that by switching to play mode. If you're in play mode, the delete button just mutes whatever is on the track, but it doesn't mute the track itself, meaning you can still play the add button on top of it. So let's get our pattern going again. So it's a super performable feature because at any time you can just flip that switch, jump in, play some stuff, and then let go, and your original pattern is still playing. I can't express just how fun and fluid and natural it feels to play this way. It's so much more in-depth than other drum machines I've used that are either super fixed to a grid or, you know, editing stuff involves a lot of kind of like dialing around with moving a step on the microtime grid or whatever you have. There are 3 different delays, so if you've got delay selected, then you can choose between them here. There's a bandpass filter, a double delay, and a pitch shift delay. And then same with if you have the reverb selected, there are 3 different reverb types, and I don't know if they correspond with those labels. They just have different flavors. Oh yeah, this mad input is also just like a weird modulator. I don't even know exactly what it does, but let's take the LFO here and patch it to there, and then play our thing again through the effects and see what that sounds like. So those are the send effects, but there is one more effect that's on the master, and that's the distortion over here. So you've got a drive amount and a mix amount. You can run it in parallel. The only thing is it can't be really used independently. It's just on the whole mix of the kit. And if you take the individual drum outs or the individual effects out, they don't go through the distortion. But it's a minor limitation. It sounds so gnarly on the whole kit. Check it out. All right, here's another weird thing, the chaos module. So this section is sample and hold plus chaos, chaos. It's got its own independent clock, but you can clock it externally. Why don't we go with our 8th multiplication again to clock it externally. And then you've got these outputs, 2 1-bit outputs, a 2-bit output, and a 3-bit output. So what that means is for the 1-bit output, you'll have 2 different values. For the 2-bit output, you'll have 4 different values. For the 3-bit output, you'll have 8 different random values. And then this is really bizarre. You can set it to 63, 16, or 217 steps. So it generates these random values and then loops them in those lengths. And you can patch these to wherever you want. Up here, there's also these 3 circuit bending patch points. And I guess what it is parts of the circuit that normally people would go to if they wanted to circuit bend something. So rather than having to kind of open this up and mess with it, those points are exposed for you. And I'm not a circuit bender. I don't know exactly what they mean, but when you run modulation through them, things get a little crazier. So I think I've showed you all of the absolutely weird and wild stuff, but let me just go over some of the more utilitarian features that this has that really make it stand out as a drum machine, because they make it so functional and so easy to integrate into the rest of your setup. So on the back top of the panel, there are 6 1/4-inch jacks, and on the left side here, there are 8 mini jacks, 1/8-inch jacks. Those could be connected to whatever you want. You can use them as outputs and bring signals from inside the system to them for use elsewhere, or you can use them as inputs and bring signals from outside into the drum machine, either sounds or CV that you want to use to get even crazier with it. So these 1/8-inch jacks are connected to the pins here, and then the 1/4-inch jacks on the back come through on these 6 pins at the bottom here. There's also a MIDI port on the back here, and it's super easy to assign any MIDI controller to do a bunch of different things on the drum machine, basically wherever there's one of these learn buttons. So you can learn a MIDI channel here and have that data patched to wherever you want through these points, and the first one does have key tracking. If you learn a note to any of these channels, that note will trigger the channel, and then you can also learn the shape and warp knobs on the bass percussion channel, and if you set this switch to MIDI in the middle there, then its pitch will track with your note data. And there are still so many other utilities, a lot of typical modular stuff. You've got 4 attenuators over here. You've got 2 VCAs over here. There are 2 inverters here, and one of them has CV control at that pin. And then there are 2 switches, noise output, 10-volt offset, ground. 1 LFO, I would have liked more, but it's there, and you can sweep it from saw to triangle to reverse saw, and there's also a pulse output there. Down here, I guess this is one more weird thing. You've got some human-controlled CV. Basically, you've got to touch both of these plates at the same time, and the amount of contact you're making with them will generate more CV. So as a demonstration, let's just patch this one to the pitch of our kick drum. I hope this video gave you some idea of why the Pulsar-23 is so exciting to me, one of my favorite pieces of gear in a long time.